What's up, savvy expats? From generation to generation, my life, my parents' life, and even my grandparents' life was completely and utterly curated by one simple concept. What is that, you may ask? Well, that is the American dream. Call me delusional, but I believe at one point America was the best country in the entire world. If that weren't the case, then there wouldn't be countless of foreign families immigrating, leaving their country for the land of the free, home of the brave, to seek out new opportunities. But just like many other Americans who decided to leave the country, I'll be speaking on why I don't see myself ever moving back to the US anytime soon, as well as why leaving America was probably the best decision my family has ever made. But before we hop into that, allow me to disclose, I by no means intend to insult, slander, or speak bad about the US. I really want to make that clear. This country holds a close place to my heart because that's where I was born and raised, and not to mention, that was where I spent my entire upbringing. But now, after having moved to the Philippines, my views have drastically shifted, and I'd love to share my experiences on why. So without wasting time, let's get into it. Being from the windy city of Chicago, the first reason we saw it fit to leave the US for the Philippines is of course because of the safety. Hands down, without a shadow of a doubt, I feel much safer in the Philippines than I did in Chicago. Now, bear in mind, it's not like my family resided in the rough and tumble streets of the South Side. No, that's not the case at all. We lived only 15 to 20 minutes just outside of downtown Chicago in the relatively peaceful suburbs. Now, that may bring you to question, why was safety such a big concern then? Well, growing up in Illinois, I always felt like it was pretty safe. But let's not deny it, guys. It was only in the past couple of years that we saw crime rates massively jump. With the political distress in the US, much less in a controversial city like Chicago, we saw crime occur that we never used to. Murder rates, kidnapping rates, theft rates, and sad to even say, school shootings became more common. And from what I see, these things were honestly expected in certain dangerous and lower income neighborhoods around the city. But little by little, what once was only prevalent in the South Side, for example, we saw these crimes begin to creep into what we thought were safe suburban towns just near us. And so safety became increasingly concerning. And I'm sure many of you from Cali can possibly relate. I've talked to a lot of you guys who've come on vacation here in the Philippines from California, and it's honestly sad to hear how what once used to be safe neighborhoods back in your town is becoming increasingly more dangerous to live in. We've all seen on the news the unfortunate crimes that occur with the shootings, the riots, and the lootings. These crimes not only just occur in these sketchy areas, but now even in these suburban towns that we wouldn't even expect. One example I have, and I don't know how many of you guys are actually familiar with the towns in and around Chicago, but we used to live near an upper class area called Oakbrook. And to paint the picture, when you drive through these subdivisions in Oakbrook, it's apparent that it would be akin for you Californians like Bel Air, and for the Floridians like Boca Raton. Big houses, safe gated communities, wealthy retirees, you get the idea. So needless to say, when we saw on our usual news channel ABC7 that there was a family robbed at gunpoint outside of Oakbrook Mall, a place that we used to go often, we were appalled. Or even a year before that, 14 thieves robbed over $140,000 worth of merchandise from the same Oakbrook Mall. And this doesn't even just occur in the wealthy parts of Chicago, even in places like California too. You also may have seen robberies on the news in prestigious places like Beverly Hills, and it just makes you wonder, if these places aren't even safe, then where can you go? I have a lot more stories from expats that I've personally met here in the Philippines, but I'll stop here because I don't really want to come off as if I'm fear-mongering. I just want to share our personal experiences because this is, after all, very prevalent in where we used to live back in Chicago, even though it was in a suburban area. But I also know that there are still very safe places to live in the US. My point being, however, crime rates have jumped quite a bit in the US, which is just one piece of the puzzle on why we decided to move to the Philippines. Now, on a more positive note, let's move on to the second reason on why I'll never move back to the US, and that is plain and simple, we just have a better life in the Philippines. In almost all areas and aspects, whether it be financially, socially, or in experiences, our quality of life is better in the Philippines. For me, there's only one area of life that Chicago far surpasses and trumps the Philippines in, and that is food. But then again, in my opinion, there's no place in the world that can beat Chicago in the food department. I really miss the Italian beefs and deep dish pizzas there. But back to my point, our quality of life in the Philippines far surpasses our quality of life back in Chicago. I distinctly remember when I told one of my classmates that we'll be moving to the Philippines, his response was, "Why would you do that? It's a third world country." And I get it, the Philippines does get a bad rep as its entirety being either just concrete jungle or impoverished makeshift houses. But what most don't actually see is a place that we chose to live in, Bonifacio Global City. This city, just like a select few other cities in the Philippines, would be considered in the upper echelons of zip codes within the country. The crime rates are low, it's a central business district of Manila with a diversity of shops and establishments to choose from, and there's glamorous high-rises throughout the city to dwell in. But what most foreigners don't know is that despite this city being considered one of, or if not the most expensive city in all of the Philippines, for the same cost of living that you'd spend in a place like Chicago or California, you can live like a king here in BGC. So needless to say, the reason we live better in even the most expensive city in the Philippines, BGC, than back in Chicago is of course because of the affordable cost of living here. By the way, I also do a full breakdown on moving to BGC as well as everything you need to know about this city before you come here, so if you want to check that out, the link is in the description. Now, the second reason is of course of what we spoke of earlier, the crime rates. The way that I can go for a walk at midnight in BGC with complete peace of mind knowing that I'll be safe would not by any means be applicable back in Chicago. Crime rates not only in BGC, but the majority of retiree dense destinations in the Philippines are relatively low. But more than just the low crime rates, our life in the Philippines is better is because we're also rich in experiences here. Traveling in the Philippines is unbelievably affordable. As I mentioned in an earlier video, one of our recent trips was taking a trip down south to Siargao to go surfing for a week. And guess how much our flight cost to go from concrete jungle to crystal clear tropical waters? Only $50 per person. And bear in mind, in the Philippines, even that can be considered pricey. So to travel from province to province and go island hopping here is not only affordable, but also offers adventurous experiences. Now, moving on to the third reason why I don't see myself moving back to the US, that is because the American dream is fading. Please take note, I did not by any means say that the American dream is dead. There is still plenty of opportunity to live a better life in the US than many other countries. But the reason why I say the American dream is fading is because we can't deny the fact that the American dream is not the same as it used to be 30 to 40 years ago. The reality is, most immigrants moving to the US today will not have as much success as immigrants like my grandparents who moved to the US back in the 50s and 60s. Why? Well, first, what exactly is the American dream? It's an ideal by which equality of opportunity is available to any citizen, allowing their highest aspirations and goals to be reached. And from that comes the fruits of what everyone sees the American dream as: home ownership, a college degree, a well-paying job, so on and so forth. But the reason I think the American dream isn't ideal as it used to be back then is because, number one, the rising prices in the US. Although owning a home is an essential part of the American dream, we've seen housing and rental prices dramatically increase. In December of 2022, we saw housing prices increase by a staggering 8.8%, following 12% increase from the previous quarter. And in December of 2021, housing prices increased an all-time high of 18.5%. And it's not just housing prices, but inflation rates in general. In 2022, the annual inflation rate hit 6.5%, and the previous year before that, in 2021, inflation rates hit 7%. So with rising inflation rates, even the prices for your basic necessities like eggs are becoming increasingly more expensive. To be exact, in 2022, a box of eggs rose in price by 60%. And so, considering the rising inflation and the rising cost of basic necessities, we would also expect a rise in wages, right? However, there's little evidence that points to any meaningful increase in wage growth. Not to mention, the American dream now is also built on plastic. What do I mean by this? Well, just to make ends meet, Americans now are more than ever shifting their expenses to credit cards and other lines of credit. As a matter of fact, statistically speaking, American households carry an average of $100,000 in debt. This is between auto loans, credit card payments, and other types of loans. And so, it's safe to say that the financial health of the average American citizen is not in good shape. This is especially the case with the younger generations, millennials in particular, who still struggle to buy homes despite carrying on this debt. In fact, the median age for home buyers in the US is 47 years old. That's 8 years older than the median age prior to the financial crisis. To add salt to this wound, the average American citizen only has $5,300 in their savings account, which only makes things look worse for the future of America. And we won't even get started on the retirement crisis in the US, where the average American citizen cannot see themselves retiring by the age of 60, and if they are already 60, are still not in a place to retire. And so, when it comes to the American dream, nowadays, with today's technology and also the cheaper cost of living in countries from abroad, we can still accomplish that without having to live in the US now. So that's just a small look of why I don't ever see myself moving back to the US anytime soon. I have plenty of other reasons, such as the Philippine hospitality, the tropical weather here being better than the snow in Chicago, and my overall happiness, but we can cover that in part 2. Feel free to comment down below if you'd be interested in seeing a part 2 so that I know if you'd be interested in more. But before we end, I also want to let you know that we're now open to consultation calls, so if you're in need of any type of connections or guidance, I can give you a hand with that. You can find that in the link in the description, where you'll briefly tell me about what you need, and then in our call, I'll provide you with all the deliverables to help you take your next step to a new life in the Philippines. And so, thank you for watching Savvy Expats. It was a pleasure, and I'll see you in the next video. God bless.